It was a hot afternoon in a small, quiet village where life moved slowly, and everyone knew each other. The sun beat down on the narrow, dusty streets, and the faint sounds of children playing and women talking in the distance were almost comforting. But behind the walls of one small, weathered house, life was far from peaceful. Inside, a young widow sat on the floor, her clothes dusty and torn, her face streaked with tears. She looked exhausted, both from the hard work she had done and from the cruelty she had endured over the years. Her hands, which were supposed to be tender and delicate, were rough from constant labor. She was forced to cook, clean, and take care of her late husband's family without any help, all while living in fear of their harsh words and angry faces. The widow had been married when she was very young. Her husband had been a kind man, full of dreams and laughter, but life had been cruel to him, and he passed away too soon. After his death, she had been left in the hands of her in-laws, who had never treated her with kindness. Every day was a struggle. She had to wake up before the sun to sweep the yard, fetch water from the faraway well, and prepare meals for everyone in the house. Any mistake, no matter how small, would anger her in-laws, and she would bear the consequences. She had learned to stay quiet, to keep her head down, and to do her work quickly, hoping to avoid punishment. On this particular day, things were worse than usual. Her in-laws had grown impatient and frustrated over minor matters. Perhaps she had cooked the food a little late or had not cleaned the floor properly. Whatever the reason, their anger was fierce, and the widow found herself cornered, unable to defend herself. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to explain, her voice trembling, but her words were ignored. She felt the sharp sting of their words, the heavy weight of blame and unfairness pressing down on her. It seemed that no matter what she did, it would never be enough. Outside the house, a man named Armin was walking along the narrow paths of the village. He was known for being kind and helpful, always willing to lend a hand to those in need. That day, he was returning from the fields, tired and dusty, thinking about the work he had done and the people he still needed to help. As he passed near the widow's house, he heard a sound that stopped him in his tracks. It was a cry, sharp and filled with fear, a sound that pierced through the calmness of the village. Armin's heart clenched. He had heard cries before, but there was something different about this one. It was desperate, pleading, and full of pain. Without thinking twice, he ran toward the source. The closer he got, the louder the cries became, until finally, he reached the doorway of the house. Peeking inside, he saw the widow on the floor, trembling and crying. She looked small and fragile, her body tense with fear. Her in-laws were standing over her, their faces twisted in anger and frustration. The scene was shocking, and Armand felt a surge of anger and sadness at the sight. He could not understand how someone could treat another human being this way, especially a young woman who had already suffered so much. The widow's eyes met his, wide and full of fear, but also filled with a glimmer of hope. She seemed to recognize that someone had finally come to see her pain, someone who might help her. Armand took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He knew he had to act quickly, but he also knew he had to be careful. One wrong move could make the situation worse for her. Summoning all his courage, he stepped inside. His voice was firm, yet controlled, as he addressed the in-laws. "Stop. This has to end right now," he said. His eyes locked on theirs. The room fell silent, and for a moment, no one moved. Armin's presence alone seemed to make a difference. The widow's in-laws were surprised. They had not expected anyone to interfere, and they hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Seeing the hesitation, Armin moved closer to the widow. He extended his hand gently and said, "Come with me. You don't have to stay here anymore." The words were simple, but they carried a weight of promise and hope. The widow looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. Could this be real? Could someone actually care enough to help her? She had been alone for so long, facing cruelty and neglect, that the idea of rescue seemed almost impossible. Yet, something in Armand's calm, determined gaze reassured her. She slowly took his hand, her fingers trembling. In that moment, the world outside the house seemed to disappear. There was no anger, no pain, no fear, just a sense of safety, however fragile it felt. Armand guided her out of the room, away from the place that had caused her so much suffering. Every step was heavy with emotion. The widow's heart was racing, but it was not just from fear. It was also from relief. For the first time in years, she felt that someone truly saw her pain and wanted to help. As they moved through the narrow streets of the village, Armand kept glancing back to ensure no one was following them. The sun continued to beat down, but it felt less oppressive now, as if the light itself was joining in their escape. The widow, still holding his hand, began to breathe more steadily. She was exhausted. Yes, but there was also a spark of hope. Perhaps life could be different. Perhaps she could have a future free from fear. They stopped under a large tree near the edge of the village. Armand let her sit for a moment, giving her time to catch her breath. He handed her a small cloth to wipe her tears, speaking softly now. "You are safe for now. We will find a place where you can rest and start again." The widow nodded, unable to speak at first. Words seemed inadequate for the mix of relief, fear, and disbelief she felt. She had longed for safety, for kindness, for someone to stand by her. Now, it was all within reach. While she rested, Armand explained his plan. They would go to a nearby town where she could find shelter and support. It would be a long journey, and there would be challenges. But she was not alone anymore. Someone would help her heal. Someone would ensure that she could live without fear. The widow listened carefully, her heart slowly filling with courage. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond pain, a life where she could be free and respected. As they prepared to leave the village, the widow glanced back at the small house she had known for so long. It had been her prison, a place of fear and suffering, but it had also been her home in a strange, harsh way. She felt a pang of sadness, but it was mixed with determination. She would not go back. She was leaving behind cruelty and pain, and stepping into a world where she could find hope and dignity. Armand and the widow set off together, walking down the dusty path that led away from the village. The journey ahead was uncertain, but the promise of safety and a new beginning made each step feel lighter. The widow's tears had dried, replaced by a quiet strength. She still felt the weight of her past, but she also carried the hope of the future. And as they walked, side by side, she knew that she was not alone anymore. Someone believed in her. Someone cared for her. And that made all the difference in the world. For the first time in years, the widow felt a sense of possibility. She had survived cruelty, endured suffering, and yet she was still here. And now, with Armand's help, she had a chance to start again, to reclaim her life, and to find the peace she had long been denied. The path ahead would not be easy, but with courage, hope, and the support of someone who truly cared, she could face it. And in that moment, under the hot afternoon sun, walking toward an uncertain but promising future, she felt something she had not felt in a long time: freedom. The journey away from the village was not easy. The narrow, dusty roads stretched endlessly under the bright sun, and the widow's feet ached with every step. Yet, she kept walking, driven by a mix of fear, hope, and curiosity about what awaited her. Armand walked beside her, quietly offering words of encouragement whenever she faltered. He knew that escaping the immediate danger was only the first step. What lay ahead would be just as challenging. Still, he was determined to make sure she reached a safe place where she could begin to rebuild her life. The widow, whose name was Amina, felt a mixture of emotions she could hardly put into words. Relief, for one, was the strongest feeling. She had finally escaped the walls that had held her prisoner for so long. Fear was still present, lingering in the corners of her mind like a shadow that refused to fade. She worried about her in-laws discovering her absence, and sending people after her. But alongside these emotions, there was a flicker of something she had not felt in years. Hope. For the first time, she dared to imagine a life where she could make her own decisions, where no one's anger or cruelty could define her day. Armand noticed the change in her expression and smiled gently. "We are almost to the edge of the village," he said, pointing toward a line of trees in the distance. "After that, it will be easier. Fewer people, fewer eyes watching." Amina nodded silently, grateful for his calm presence. She had been alone for so long that even small acts of kindness now felt overwhelming. Every encouraging word, every gentle gesture, was like a light in the darkness she had lived in for years. As they walked, Amina began to tell her story. At first, it was slow, halting, and full of pauses. Her voice trembled as she spoke about her late husband, about the moments of happiness that had once existed, and about the cruelty she had endured after his passing. Armand listened without interruption, letting her speak at her own pace. He did not judge or offer solutions right away. He simply provided a safe space for her to release the emotions she had been carrying for so long. "I never thought anyone would care," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the dusty ground. "No one in the village ever came to help me. I thought this life was all I could ever have." Her voice broke, and Armand gently squeezed her hand in reassurance. "You are not alone anymore, Amina. You have someone who cares, someone who will stand by you. That is a start," he said. The walk to the nearby town took most of the afternoon. Along the way, they passed fields where farmers were tending to their crops and children playing by the roadside. The world seemed to continue as usual, indifferent to the struggles of one small woman. But for Amina, every step away from her village felt like leaving behind a lifetime of fear and stepping into something new, something she could not yet fully understand. As evening approached, Armand led her to a small, safe house he knew of, managed by a local woman who offered shelter to those in need. The house was modest, with simple walls, a clean floor, and a few beds. There were no locks on the doors, no heavy chains. Just a feeling of quiet safety that Amina had not known for years. The woman who ran the place greeted them warmly. Her smile was gentle, full of understanding, and Amina felt a wave of relief wash over her. Finally, she could rest. Over the next few days, Amina slowly began to recover. She slept without fear for the first time in years, waking up to a sense of calm she had almost forgotten existed. The safe house provided food, medical care, and a supportive environment where she could begin to heal. Every meal, every quiet moment of rest, was a step toward reclaiming the life she had been denied. Armand visited regularly, checking in to see how she was doing and offering reassurance that she was not alone in this journey. Even in the safety of the new place, Amina's mind often wandered back to her village. She worried about her in-laws, discovering her location. The thought of being found and dragged back into that life filled her with fear. Armand, sensing her anxiety, reminded her gently, "They can try, but you have taken the first step toward your freedom. No one can take that away from you. You are stronger than you realize." His words comforted her, though she knew the path ahead would still be filled with challenges. As the days passed, Amina began to explore the town and the opportunities it offered. She met other women who had been in similar situations, women who had suffered but had found ways to rebuild their lives. Listening to their stories, Amina realized she was not alone in her struggle. There were people who cared, communities that supported one another, and ways to stand up for herself without fear. These realizations slowly strengthened her resolve. She began to imagine a future where she could live with dignity and independence. Armand continued to guide her, not by making decisions for her but by helping her see her own strength. He spoke to her about education, small ways to earn a living, and the importance of knowing her rights. "You have a voice, Amina," he said one evening as they sat together after dinner. "It is time you use it. You have endured so much, but now you can choose what your life will be." Amina listened carefully, feeling a mix of apprehension and determination. The idea of standing up for herself was frightening, but it also filled her with a sense of possibility she had never felt before. One evening, while they were sitting by the window, Amina heard the faint sound of footsteps outside. Her heart raced, and fear returned like an unwelcome visitor. Armin immediately noticed her tension and moved closer. "It is okay," he whispered. "You are safe here. No one can reach you." Amina took a deep breath, slowly letting the tension leave her body. She realized that although fear would always be a part of her past, it did not have to control her present. Over the next few weeks, Amina began to take small steps toward independence. She learned to manage her day, helping with chores in the safe house, and gradually took on responsibilities that gave her confidence. She practiced speaking up for herself in small ways, learning to assert her needs without fear of anger or punishment. Each small victory was a reminder that she was capable, that she had the right to live her life without oppression. Through these experiences, Amina began to see Arman not just as a rescuer, but as a guide and friend. He had helped her escape the immediate danger. But more importantly, he had shown her that someone could care, that trust was possible, and that a new life could be built from the ashes of the old. Their relationship was one of mutual respect, understanding, and quiet support. Armin never pressured her, never rushed her healing, and always listened when she needed to speak. Despite the progress, the shadow of her past still loomed. Messages and rumors from her village occasionally reached her, reminding her that the world outside the safe house was not entirely safe. But with each passing day, Amina's fear lessened. She realized that the choices she made now, the courage she displayed, and the support she accepted, all contributed to her growing strength. She began to understand that healing was a process, that it would take time, but that every step forward was worth the effort. By the end of the first month in the town, Amina was no longer the same frightened woman who had run from her village. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more aware of her rights. She had discovered the power of trust, of hope, and of human kindness. And although the journey was far from over, she felt ready to face whatever came next. With Armand by her side and a supportive community around her, she knew that the path ahead, though challenging, could lead to freedom, dignity, and a life she had always dreamed of. The days in the town grew into weeks, and Amina's life slowly began to take shape. Each morning, she woke up to a world that felt safer and kinder than the one she had left behind. The sun shone gently over the small streets, the air carried the scent of fresh bread and flowers, and the sound of children laughing in the distance was no longer a reminder of what she had lost but a sign of life moving forward. For the first time in many years, Amina could breathe without the constant weight of fear pressing on her chest. Armand continued to be her guide and support, helping her navigate this new world. He introduced her to the people who ran the safe house, women and men who had devoted their lives to helping those who had suffered. There were counselors, teachers, and volunteers who welcomed her without judgment. They encouraged her to speak, to share her story if she wished, and most importantly, to believe that she deserved a life of freedom and respect. At first, Amina was hesitant. Speaking about her past felt strange and almost shameful, because she had grown up believing that her suffering was something to be hidden. But with gentle encouragement, she slowly began to open up. She joined small group sessions with other women who had faced difficulties in their lives. Listening to their stories, Amina realized that she was not alone. Each woman had endured her own trials, yet each had also found ways to reclaim her life. Some had started small businesses, others had gone back to school, and many had become mentors to younger women in need. Amina began to feel a spark inside her, a sense that she too could find a new purpose and build a life on her own terms. Armin encouraged her to take small steps toward independence. He helped her enroll in a literacy class and a skills program that would allow her to earn her own income. Each lesson was a new experience, a challenge, and a victory. Amina learned to read and write better, to count money accurately, and even to sew and prepare simple crafts that could be sold in the local market. Every skill she gained was a reminder of her ability to grow, to survive, and to thrive. She began to feel a confidence that had been buried under years of fear and oppression. Even as Amina grew stronger, the past was never far behind. Rumors from her village continued to reach her occasionally, carried by travelers or local merchants. There were whispers about what she had done, where she had gone, and the anger of her in-laws. Each message brought a flicker of fear, a reminder that she had escaped danger but not the memory of it. Armand noticed her anxiety and spoke gently to her. "Fear is natural, Amina. But remember, the past cannot control you unless you allow it to. You have taken steps that most people never have the courage to take. You are safe here, and you are stronger than you think." His words gave her courage, and slowly, she began to see that while the past could influence her, it did not define her future. One day, while helping at the safe house, Amina encountered a woman named Salma. Salma had once been in a situation similar to Amina's and had now built a life of independence. She ran a small tailoring business and mentored other women who were learning new skills. Seeing Salma's confidence and the life she had created inspired Amina. She realized that the freedom she had gained could be more than just safety. It could be a path to independence, self-respect, and a future she could shape herself. Salma became a mentor to Amina, teaching her not only practical skills but also the importance of believing in her own abilities. Amina began to participate more actively in the Safe House's community. She helped organize activities, taught younger women some of the skills she had learned, and offered words of encouragement to those who were struggling. Every time she helped someone else, she felt a sense of pride and fulfillment she had never experienced before. The acts of teaching, supporting, and caring for others gave her a new purpose and slowly healed the wounds of her past. But despite these positive changes, Amina knew that she could not ignore her past forever. The fear of her in-laws' wrath still lingered in her mind. She worried about what might happen if they tried to track her down or cause trouble. Armand, understanding her concerns, began to guide her on how to face the past safely. He explained that there were legal avenues and community support systems that could protect her. He encouraged her to think about taking steps that could ensure her freedom and safety permanently. The idea of confronting her in-laws legally was terrifying. Amina had grown up in a world where women were often silenced, where their voices did not matter. But as she listened to Armand and the counselors, she realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. She began to understand that taking action could not only protect her but also prevent her in-laws from hurting others in the future. Slowly, the thought of standing up for herself began to replace the fear that had dominated her life for so long. Amina began preparing herself mentally and emotionally for the challenge. She learned about her legal rights, how to document her experiences, and the importance of having witnesses who could support her case. The process was not easy. There were moments when she felt overwhelmed, memories of the past threatening to paralyze her. But with Armand's steady presence, Salma's guidance, and the support of the Safe House community, she found the strength to continue. Each step forward, no matter how small, was a victory. During this time, Amina also began to explore her own identity beyond her role as a widow and victim. She discovered hobbies and interests she had never had the chance to pursue. She started writing, expressing her thoughts and feelings on paper, which helped her process her experiences. She also spent time walking in the town, observing life around her, and imagining what her own future could look like. With each passing day, she grew more confident, more self-assured, and more ready to face the challenges ahead. The turning point came one afternoon when Amina received news that her in-laws had sent a letter to the local authorities, claiming that she had been abducted. For a moment, panic set in. The familiar fear of being hunted and silenced returned. But this time, she did not feel helpless. She turned to Armand and the counselors at the Safe House. Together, they devised a plan. They would present evidence of her past suffering, the abuse she had endured, and her rightful decision to seek safety and independence. The legal system, though slow and often frustrating, could provide protection and justice. Amina realized that standing up to her in-laws was no longer just about herself. It was about sending a message that abuse, fear, and cruelty could not control the lives of others. It was about creating a world where women like her could speak, act, and live without being silenced. This realization gave her courage and determination she had never known before. She was no longer just running from fear. She was taking steps to ensure that her life, and the lives of others, could be different. In the weeks that followed, Amina prepared herself for the legal proceedings. She met with lawyers, gathered testimonies, and documented every detail of her experiences. Each meeting, each conversation, reminded her of how far she had come. She was no longer the frightened, quiet woman who had fled her village months ago. She was strong, determined, and ready to reclaim her life. Armand continued to support her, offering guidance and reassurance, but he never overshadowed her voice. Amina's actions and decisions were her own, and that made the victories all the more meaningful. Throughout this process, Amina's relationship with Armand evolved. It was no longer just one of rescuer and rescued. It had grown into a partnership based on trust, respect, and shared purpose. Armand had been there for her at her lowest points, but he also gave her the space to grow, to learn, and to become independent. Their bond was quiet, built on understanding rather than words, and it became a source of strength for Amina as she faced the challenges ahead. By the end of this period, Amina had transformed. She was no longer a victim of circumstance. She had taken control of her life, faced her fears, and begun to shape her future. The journey of healing, empowerment, and preparation for justice had been long and difficult, but it had also revealed her strength, courage, and resilience. She had discovered that even after years of suffering, it was possible to rebuild, to trust, and to live with dignity. Amina knew that the final steps, legal confrontation and full independence, were still ahead, but she faced them with confidence, equipped with knowledge, support, and an unshakable belief in her right to a life free from fear. The road would not be easy, and there would be challenges, but for the first time, she truly believed that she could overcome them. She had survived, she had grown, and she had discovered the power within herself to take control of her life. And in that quiet moment, standing by the window of the safe house, watching the sun set over the town, Amina allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in years: pride. Pride in her journey, pride in her courage, and pride in the life she was beginning to build. The past was still there, but it no longer had the power to define her. The future, bright and full of possibility, awaited. The day had finally come when Amina would face her in-laws. Not as the frightened woman they once controlled, but as someone who had taken charge of her life. The morning was calm, the sun shining gently over the town, casting soft light on the streets. Birds chirped in the distance, and the air carried the faint scent of flowers and fresh bread. Amina felt her heart racing, a mixture of nerves and determination filling her chest. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment when courage and preparation would meet action. Armand was by her side, as he had been throughout her journey. He had helped her gather all the evidence, arrange meetings with lawyers, and prepare emotionally for what lay ahead, but he never spoke over her or made decisions for her. Today, she was the one speaking, the one standing tall, and he offered only support and encouragement. "You are ready, Amina," he said softly. "Remember, this is about your life, your rights, and your future. You are stronger than you know." Amina took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past and the promise of the future all at once. Her in-laws had come to the town, summoned by the authorities. They had expected to intimidate her, to make her feel small and helpless as they had for years. But as they approached, they saw not a scared, silent widow, but a woman standing with dignity, calm, yet resolute. Amina met their eyes without fear, and for the first time, they realized that she was no longer under their control. The legal proceedings began in a small, local office. Amina sat with her lawyer, who explained each step and reassured her that the law was on her side. She had documented years of mistreatment, gathered testimonies from neighbors, and collected support from the safe house and community members. Each piece of evidence strengthened her case and reminded her of how far she had come. She had endured so much, and now she had the opportunity to ensure that justice would be served. As the in-laws made their statements, claiming that she had run away without reason, Amina felt a wave of emotions. Anger, fear, and sadness tried to creep in, But she focused on the truth. She spoke clearly and calmly, recounting the years of unfair treatment, the fear she had lived with, and the moments of cruelty that had marked her life. Every word was spoken with courage and dignity. She was no longer afraid of their reactions. She was speaking for herself and for the life she deserved. Witnesses came forward to support her. Some were neighbors from the village, who had seen the hardships she endured. Others were members of the town and safe house who had interacted with her and seen her grow into a strong, independent woman. Each testimony added weight to her story, showing that she had not only survived but had thrived in the face of adversity. The in-laws were visibly frustrated. They had expected fear, submission, and silence. But Amina's courage and preparation left them powerless in the face of the truth. Throughout the proceedings, Armand remained quietly supportive, offering reassurance when Amina's emotions threatened to overwhelm her. He reminded her to breathe, to focus on the facts, and to trust in the preparation she had done over the past months. She took his advice to heart, finding strength in his calm presence and in her own resilience. With each step, each statement, she felt more empowered, more capable of taking full control of her life. After several days of testimony and discussions, the authorities reached a decision. The in-laws were held accountable for their actions, and Amina was legally recognized as independent and free from their control. The relief that washed over her was immense. She had faced the fear that had haunted her for years, and she had come out victorious. The justice was not only about punishment for the in-laws, but also about validating her life, her rights, and her ability to live freely. With the legal process concluded, Amina began to focus on building her new life fully. She found a small apartment in the town, furnished simply but comfortably. It was her first home where she could make her own decisions, decorate as she wished, and live according to her own rules. Every corner of that apartment represented freedom and independence. She could cook what she wanted, sleep without fear, and live without constantly worrying about someone else's anger. Amina also began exploring work opportunities. She used the skills she had learned at the safe house, like sewing and crafting, to start a small business. At first, it was challenging. There were moments when she doubted herself and wondered if she could truly manage on her own. But with encouragement from Armand and her mentors at the safe house, she persevered. Slowly, her business grew, and with it, her confidence. Every sale, every satisfied customer was a reminder that she was capable, resourceful, and deserving of success. Socially, Amina began to build connections in the town. She joined local groups, met other women who had faced challenges, and shared experiences with people who understood her journey. The community welcomed her warmly, and she slowly built friendships that were based on mutual respect and support. For the first time in her life, she felt that she belonged somewhere without fear or shame. These relationships became a source of strength, a network that reminded her that she was not alone in this world. Emotionally, Amina continued to heal. The scars of the past were still there, but they no longer controlled her. She wrote in her journal, expressing her feelings, dreams, and hopes for the future. Writing became a form of therapy, a way to reflect on her journey and acknowledge the progress she had made. Each entry reminded her of her strength, her courage, and the fact that she had survived not only hardship but also her own doubts. One evening, as the sun set over the town, casting a warm golden light across the streets, Amina sat on her small balcony, reflecting on how far she had come. The journey had been long and difficult, filled with fear, uncertainty, and pain, but it had also revealed her resilience, her capacity for courage, and her ability to reclaim her life. She thought of the people who had helped her along the way, the counselors, mentors, and especially Armand, who had stood by her side without ever taking control. She felt gratitude, not just for the support she had received, but for the strength she had discovered within herself. Amina also began thinking about the future beyond survival. She dreamed of helping other women who were trapped in situations similar to the one she had endured. She envisioned a community where women could find safety, education, and the opportunity to build independent lives. The thought filled her with purpose. Her experience, once a source of fear and pain, had now become a source of inspiration and motivation. She realized that her journey could help others, that her courage could become a guiding light for women in need. Armand remained a close part of her life, not as a rescuer, but as a friend and companion who shared in her victories and challenges. Their bond was quiet, built on mutual respect and understanding. They did not need constant words to communicate. Their presence and support for one another were enough. Armand had been there when she needed protection, guidance, and reassurance. But he had also allowed her the space to grow and take control of her own life. Their relationship became a symbol of trust, kindness, and the importance of standing by someone without controlling them. In time, Amina's confidence grew to the point where she began mentoring other women at the safe house. She shared her story, not as a tale of suffering, but as a story of survival, courage, and empowerment. She helped teach skills, guided women in understanding their rights, and encouraged them to believe in themselves. Each woman she helped strengthened her own sense of purpose and reminded her that the pain of the past could be transformed into something meaningful and powerful. Through these experiences, Amina fully embraced the life she had fought to reclaim. She was no longer defined by fear, cruelty, or the control of others. She was independent, empowered, and capable of shaping her own destiny. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She had discovered the strength within herself to face the past, stand up for her rights, and build a future full of hope and possibility. And finally, one quiet evening, Amina stood by her balcony, looking out at the town bathed in the soft glow of twilight. She felt a profound sense of peace. The road had been long and difficult, filled with obstacles she had never imagined she could overcome. But she had survived. She had grown, and she had triumphed. The life she now led was hers to shape, guided by courage, hope, and the lessons she had learned along the way. She had faced her fears, taken control of her destiny, and created a life of dignity, independence, and purpose. Amina's journey was far from over, but she no longer feared the future. Each step forward was a choice, a decision to embrace freedom, strength, and hope. She had learned that even in the darkest moments, there was a path to light, and that with courage, determination, and support, it was possible to reclaim one's life, restore one's dignity, and inspire others to do the same. And in that moment, as the sun disappeared behind the horizon, Amina smiled, knowing that she was finally free, and that her future was hers to create.